Hello and welcome back, it is Shrike here with another D&D video, and today we're going to talk about if you should be using random encounters in your game. Some of you might be confused thinking that's not even a question, of course you should be using random encounters in your game. Well, let me talk about why I don't use them in my game, and let's have a little discussion all around random encounters. But before we get onto that, I just want to let you know I upload Dungeons & Dragons content here on YouTube every Monday and every Thursday, so make sure to subscribe if you want to take part in discussions like these, if you want to improve your game, or if you want to keep up with Dungeons & Dragons news. So as I've already said, I don't use random encounters in my game, so let's talk about why that is. The type of game that I run as a Dungeon Master is very story driven, and there's a little bit less combat and stuff like that than maybe some other games out there. And the players I have in my game generally are the same way as well. They're not as interested in combat and level progression, but they're just more interested in what's going on in a story and weaving a good story with all of their friends around the table. And this is a really important point to answer the question about should you be using random encounters, because every table is going to be different. That's my table, a very story driven, but your table might be completely different and they prefer combat and they prefer the whole mid-maxing style and leveling up and getting experience and stuff like that. But because I run more story-driven campaigns, if I started rolling random encounters when we were travelling from A to B, it would just put a little bit of a roadblock from progressing the story. And that's a big part of how some people use random encounters. It's not a story tool at all or something like that. It's a random encounter. It's you're getting attacked by wolves or a random traveller comes selling you wares and stuff like that. Generally, they're nothing to do with the story. They're completely random and they're trying to build the world a bit more. A lot of the roll tables that Dungeons & Dragons book provide you are even worse than that, to be completely honest. They just roll on a table, roll how many wolves there are, there you go, now you're in combat. Now, I want to make it clear that I do put encounters in the travel, but they're not random. I have pre-planned them, and there's a reason they're there, either to progress the story or to give another side quest that they could go on and tell another story somewhere else. So I don't have a table of 20 different encounters and roll a d20 to see what happens. I've decided before they get there that there's these options of maybe 3 or 4 different encounters that they could have depending on how they interact with this thing, and then they interact with it, so we go off in this direction, which progresses the story or tells a new story. And I think this is a really good way to do encounters on the road, because then rather than everyone having to just stop whatever is going on to fight 4 wolves, they actually get a bit of story and they can get a bit more lore about your world or whatever it is that you want to throw in. I'm just going to reiterate though that this is my table. There are games out there which are just all about the combat and all about getting experience, so having the random encounters on the road which are just a few wolves or a troll or whatever it is might work really well in your game. As a DM, you do sometimes have to step away from the table and work out what your players want and what type of game you want to play, rather than just going along with it and seeing what happens. Just step back a bit and decide if your table is the type of table that would like random encounters with wolves to get experience and to have combat, or if they're the type of table that prefer the more story elements, the roleplay elements, and inject them through your random encounters or your not random encounters. Now, rolling dice and the randomness of Dungeons & Dragons is a big part of the game, so if you really enjoy the ability to roll dice to decide what happens, here are some different ways that you can do it than just rolling for really random encounters. I like to always have 5 encounters that I can pick up and place pretty much anywhere, but have a contained side story that connects to them. For example, there could be an encounter which is all about a hut in the woods, and if they investigate, they realise that there's been some sort of experiment that's been going on, and they find a trapdoor that goes down into an experimental room, and there's a whole mini dungeon down below. But I could easily pick up that encounter and then put it in the mountains, and now there's a random door in the side of a mountain that they can go through and find the exact same thing. Or I could put it in a snowy area, and while they're walking they kick something metal, which is actually a little trapdoor that takes them into this building, and they still have the exact same side quest. Or even if they're on a boat, they can come across a random island that just has a hut on it and nothing else, a few trees maybe, and once again the exact same side quest, just a different environment. The important thing with creating an encounter like this is that it's all closed off and contained within the encounter itself. That way it is much easier to just pick it up and put it wherever you need it in the story. I've said in the video a few times that I run more story-driven campaigns, and if you're doing the same, I just want to make it clear that that doesn't mean that everything that happens in the campaign has to do with whatever the main plot line is. You can have side quest lines or side plots that are going on as well that you can use these encounters for, and sometimes if the players are getting a little bit fatigued by the main quest line, it's actually really good to inject a bit of these side quests in, and then they'll be reinvigorated and excited to investigate this new thing that's going on. If you are the type of dungeon master that likes rolling dice, so getting rid of random encounters is a little bit scary, but what I've said in this video does resonate with you a little bit, then what I would suggest is roll dice when you're building the encounter before the session even starts. So using my hut in the woods example from earlier, maybe you could roll some dice to work out what sort of humanoids there are going to be in this dungeon, the types of monsters there are going to be, maybe the types of traps and stuff like that. So you can still use dice to actually build the encounter, but you just do it before the session rather than rolling it during the session to work out what's happening. That is pretty much everything I want to say on the subject, but I am really interested to hear what other people think about this and what they think about my approach versus the typical roll table in the session style approach. So make sure to put your views down in the comments below, keep it friendly and make it a discussion rather than you just telling me that I'm wrong. If you have found this video useful, please do give it a like, it does help me to grow this channel, and make sure to subscribe if you want to see more content like this. As I said earlier, I upload every Monday and every Thursday. But until next time, happy gaming.